In today's walkthrough, we're going to be taking a look at how you can replace paper-based processes in a local government scenario. In this instance, we're going to be taking a look at a request for a change to a county approach or address. We'll be leveraging Nintex Workflow Cloud and a Nintex Workflow Cloud form to automate this process. In this walkthrough, we'll start by looking at the request form and all the controls that make up that form, as well as the rules that power the dynamic capabilities of Nintex Workflow Cloud. We'll then look at the workflow and see how this data that's captured via our form can be processed and automated within our organization. This particular form and workflow are going to be based on the application process that I found on the Chelan County website. Currently, this process is just a linked PDF that has to be filled out and provided back to the county. What we've done is analyze this form and then translated it into a Nintex Workflow Cloud form that could be embedded directly within the website. There is also a step in this process that needs to be managed by the Public Works Office. To help streamline this process, we'll automatically take the information from the request form and send it via a task to the Public Works Officer. This way, the task can be approved or rejected, and then our document can be automatically generated using document generation within Nintex Workflow Cloud. You'll notice that our copy of the approach application template already has document generation tags added to it. If you'd like a copy of this document, you can find it within the description of the workflow template on the Nintex Process Accelerator Gallery. To find this template, you can go to gallery.nintex.com, go to Workflows, make sure that you're on Nintex Workflow Cloud, and then find the County Approach Application template. You can then download this template directly into your environment and follow along with this walkthrough. The first step in any form-based process is going to be designing our start form. We can see that in the configuration, we've updated this so that anyone with the form URL can access the form. This is important as we want it to be available on a public-facing website. We can then select Design Form to open the Nintex Forms Designer, and in here you can see all of the controls that have been added to our form. And this is essentially a replication of the PDF that was hosted on the county website. While not exactly the same format, it does have the same information that's been broken into roughly 5 different parts. Our application owner information, project location, address type, approach type, and then some instructions for the applicant. Back in our Nintex form, we've broken each of these sections into a group. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we put this form together. Here at the top, this first control is actually just a label where we've entered some additional information about our County Public Work Department. The next control on our form is a choice control, and this is going to let us know what is the application for. Is it an address request or an approach to a county road? We also added a note down at the bottom that there is a $10 discount if applying for both at the same time, and we leveraged the description field to pass that information to the end user. We also could have leveraged the tooltip. There's a slight difference in how that's displayed to the end user. So if we go into preview, we can see that the tooltip will show up as the small I next to the title. For the bulk of the information on our request form, we're holding that information within groups. The group control provides a way to logically nest different controls together. We not only can then move around the group with all the controls inside it as needed, but once we reach a stage where we need to make dynamic changes to the form, we can actually apply rules to the group, and it will be applied to all the controls within that group. In this particular case, we've set our show header to yes, and we've provided it with the header text of application and owner information. Within the group control, we have several text short controls where we're going to be capturing various different types of information. The first text short control is going to be our applicant name. We'll then also capture our mailing address, as well as the city, state, zip, and phone. However, in the city, zip, and phone, we will be doing some input validation to ensure that we get data in the right format. In these controls, we are leveraging a text mask to make sure that data is entered in a specific pattern. In the state control, we're leveraging the AA pattern, which will make sure they can only enter 2 letters, while in the zip and phone controls, we are leveraging a numerical text mask that will make sure they can only enter numbers in a certain pattern. In the phone control, we've also added a placeholder to demonstrate to the end user what format their information should be in. Now, if we look at the preview, we can see that any of these fields with an input mask, when the user starts entering information, they will be displayed how many more characters or numbers are available to be entered. Once they've reached that limit, they can no longer enter any additional information into that field. Within this group, we also have fields for owner information if they're not the same as the applicant. These fields of owner name, address, city, state, zip, and phone number will be configured the same as our previous fields with the same text masks. One difference is that we do have an email control. The email control has a built-in text mask that will help validate that an email is being entered in the right format. Another important step in ensuring that we're capturing the appropriate data will be making sure that we have required fields on our form. In this case, while the owner information may not be required, the applicant information is, so we can go back through and update these fields with required set to yes. We can also go ahead and pull the email control up to the top of the form, as we might not need the owner's email, but we will need the applicant's email. The next group on our form is going to be the project location. Within this group, we are going to be leveraging text short controls to capture both the county road name and the MP information. Then for the additional information control, we're actually leveraging a text long. Text long controls can be configured with rich text. However, in this case, I just have this configured as a plain text control. As we get down into parcel number, this will actually be a number control. And then our property address, city, state, and zip will be configured similar to the text short controls that we used earlier in our form. Finally, applicant's UBI number is also a number control. However, we've added a description of if business to indicate to the end user that this is not necessarily required if they're not entering information related to a business. As we start looking at our address type group, if we look back at our PDF form, we can see that these values are the same as what was there. We're leveraging a choice multi-control to display this information to the end user. Within the choice multiple control, we can enter our values in a comma-separated list, and then we can change our alignment to either vertical or horizontal. We additionally added a text short control to capture some additional information if the end user selected Other. Similar to the address type group, the controls within the approach type group are set up in the same way. If we take a look at Preview, currently we can see that when a user selects Other or any other option within these choice controls, the Other text field is still visible regardless of the selection. We only want this text control visible if the other option has been selected. To build this functionality, let's take a look at rules within Nintex Forms. Within the Rules tab, if we select Add New, we want to give this first rule a descriptive name, so we'll call it Show Address Other, and then we want to set this up in an if-then format. In this case, if address type selection includes Other, then our address type Other control will be visible and our address type Other will be required. Else, our address type Other will not be visible and will not be required. So we can then hit Create Rule, and then we can add another rule to apply the same logic for our approach selections. With both rules created, we can now go back into our preview, and we can see that the text controls are not automatically visible. However, when we select the other option, those text controls appear and they are now required. In our final group of the page, we do want to make sure that these construction dates are required, as we need to know when we want this project to start and when it's estimated to complete. These estimated start and estimated completion dates are date time controls, and in both cases we have restricted past dates, as we don't want either of these to be before the user is submitting the form. With this first page now completed, we can go ahead and jump to our second page to look at the final controls on this form. Now, if you're curious about how we configured these pages for the form, you can select the Configure Pages option at the top right, and from within this configuration panel, you can then add new pages, change your title size, or update your navigation flow. You also can update the navigation layout, which will change it from this horizontal tabbed layout to a vertical listed layout. Here on our second page, this first control is just a label with instructions for the applicant. We have added some styling to this so that it is a numbered list. Down here at the bottom, we then request that the applicant certifies that they have read, understood, and agree to the terms of this application. They can do this using the signature control, and then our signing date control will automatically pull in today's date. We are getting today's date as the default value using the function of date now. To add this, we can go into Insert. Under Functions, we can do a search for date. We can insert the date now function, and then select Update. We've also set this control to read only, so they can't change the date on which they're doing the signing. And with that, we've now completed our request form. We can select Apply Changes at the top, and we will see that all of the controls on our form have now been turned into start event variables that can be leveraged within our workflow. Starting to take a look at the workflow now, the first step is going to be setting up our variables that need to be leveraged throughout the workflow. While this step is not required in every workflow, because we are working with various different dates, I want to make sure that those are always going to be in the same format. I also have several multi-choice controls that I want to be able to pull the values into a ordered list, and so I'm going to use regular expressions to get that information here at the start of the workflow. If we take a look at this extract address type action, we can see that it is a apply regular expression action. And if we wanted to find this action, it's under Operations, and we can just drag it directly onto our design canvas. Here in our configuration, our input text is going to be our address type control from our form. This data is coming in as a collection of values because that was a multi-choice control on the form. I'm going to be using a replace operation with this particular pattern so that I only get a comma-separated list at the end. I'll then go ahead and store that result into a text address that I just called txt address type. I'll then leverage this later in the workflow. And then we're doing exactly the same thing for approach type, just with a slightly different input and output. This way we keep our values separated. The next steps in this workflow are going to be around formatting these dates. Like I stated earlier, we are collecting a lot of dates on our form, and we want to make sure that they always come back in the same format, regardless of where the user is that submitted this information. In this case, I always want my format to be my month, day, year format, and I'm going to convert the times to a standard PST time zone. I'll then store this output as a string called start date, and then for my end date, I will store it as a string called end date. In this action set, I also have a log to instance details where I'm just checking to make sure that I got my address types and approach types correct. Now that we've made sure we've got those initial variables in the right format, we can actually pass all this information via a task to the county works office. In this case, we're going to leverage the assign a task action. In this example, we're going to be using a form-based approval. And so let's go ahead and update our task action so we know exactly what it's going to be doing. It's always a good idea to make sure that your actions have verbose names. This will help not only in you knowing what your workflow design is, but also in other designers coming in and looking at your workflow for the first time. Within this task, we can see that we have two outcomes, rejected and completed. Based on these, the workflow will then go down one or the other branch in the logic. While we'll get to those actions in a moment, you can see that it's very easy to understand where the workflow will go based on the outcome of this task. Within my assignee, I've assigned it to engineering@county.gov, and then I've provided a subject, a small message body, and the attached applicant signature for review. Let's also take a couple of minutes to look at the task form that's being sent to be reviewed. Here within the task designer, we can see that we have all the same information from our start form. This way, the task approver can actually review all this information directly on their own form and then enter their additional information within the Public Works Office use. The way that you can build this is within this form designer, you can see all of the start event variables. We then just drag these back onto the design canvas in the same format, and then can add any additional fields that are needed to complete the task. Now, if we go back and look at the PDF, we can see that there were additional fields for just the Public Works Office. Now, we did not display these fields on our start form as they're not something that needed to be interacted with by the applicant. However, they do need to be interacted with by the approver. In this particular example, these controls are all going to be short text and number controls, other than the comment notes control, which is going to be a text long. Underneath, the addressing reviewed by is going to be a text short, date will be a date time control, and then our applicant notified by will be a choice control. We also want to update this default value to email, as we will be sending an automated email as part of this workflow. However, if there is another channel that the applicant is being notified by, they could go and change this as well. We can also set our notification date to date now. We then finally have our rejected or completed outcome. You will also notice this rejection comments, as we need to provide the submitter some information about why their application was rejected. However, we only want to display that field if rejected is the selected outcome. To build this logic, we'll again leverage rules here on the task form, and this show rule will be very similar to the ones that we built earlier. Here, if outcome equals rejected, then our rejection comments are going to be visible and required, else they will not be visible and they will not be required. With our task action configured, we can now take a look at the different outcomes and what actions need to go within these branches. Let's first take a look at the completed branch. We first need to go ahead and format the date controls that were on that task form. The reason that we have to do these after the task has been completed instead of in our earlier action set is because you cannot format a date variable that is empty, and so it does need some values to be able to do that formatting. With those values updated, we can now go ahead and generate our final document. If we take a moment and look back at our application document, we can see that we need to be able to enter a bunch of dynamic values into this Word doc. The way that we're going to do that is leveraging these tags that you see here within our template. Again, if you'd like a copy of this template, it is available within the Nintex Process Accelerator Gallery. To enter these, we'll do that from within the Workflow Designer, and we can open the Nintex Document Generation Tagger. The document tagger provides us the tags that relate to any variables that have been built within this workflow. This could be either user-defined variables within the workflow or start event variables from our form. To add these, we simply have to select them, and then if we had our Word document open, we could paste these directly into the field where they're needed. The only piece that needs a little bit of additional information is going to be that signature that we captured in our form. We're going to add this as an image, and so to do that, we would expand the Images section and select Add Image. We would provide it with the file variable that we collected from our start form, and then we would give it an image name that would then be available within our document tagger. From our document generation action, we will then grab all of the files and store them into a collection variable named Generated Documents. In this particular example, we're leveraging Box as our SAS file storage system. I have my paths set up so that I'm pulling this template from a specific folder, and then I'm outputting the generated document back to a different folder with a dynamic name. With the generate document action configured, we then can send an approval email back to the requester, letting them know that their request has been approved, and we can attach a copy of that document for them. As you can see, we can leverage dynamic values within the message body, and we can attack those generated documents as a file attachment. Otherwise, if for some reason this application was rejected, we then also can send a rejection notification letting them know that it has been rejected, including those rejection comments that we captured on our task form, and letting them know that they can reach out to us if they have any questions. So as you can see, in this process, we not only built a form that can be embedded directly into the website, we also have streamlined the approval process and the document storage process for filing and archiving purposes later. I hope this walkthrough has been helpful in showing how we designed this workflow and how you could potentially design and automate other processes within your organization. please make sure to check out the other walkthrough videos that we have related to Nintex Workflow Cloud, and we can't wait to see what you build next.